every time the funders obviously thought we couldn't make the deadline. So we made the deadline and we said, yes, we've got an umbrella organisation.
That's
And
amazing.
so we gave them no excuse not to
Yes.
fund us
Yeah.
and not to go ahead with it. So we ended up with the funding. And so we started meeting at Crossroads Clubhouse to start to do all the policies and procedures and service development and service design and everything. And that took us, I think it was close to another 2 years, like the Lighthouse. And then we managed to get, like the Lighthouse, we managed to get a Housing New Zealand community house in Mount Eden Road.
And people don't know now it's called Changing Minds.
It's now called Changing Minds. So that's the beginning of the Regional Consumer Network.
So thank you so much for coming.
It's all right.
It's really an honor to have you, Claire, because we know each other for a long time, isn't it? Yeah. I want to acknowledge that, like when we met, that was around early 2000 at the Regional Consumer Network. As usual, I usually let my guests introduce themselves. Would you like to do that?
Sure. I grew up in an unusual environment, not a typical environment. I was one of 10 children and my parents adopted 7 children. And we were all different, and we're still all different these days. And mum and dad have passed now, but it was a very unusual upbringing. And it had a lot of stressors. And
I can imagine because, so can you kind of put an age on, like 1 to 10, what? Were you middle, younger?
I was the 4th to oldest.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
But my sister, who is profoundly deaf, she's about 5 months older than me.
I see.
But she kind of needed the support and that kind of thing. So I kind of by default became the oldest daughter.
Yeah.
And so that meant that I kind of took on a lot of responsibility at times.
Yeah.
And
so you were one of the 3 biological children of the 10.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, being the oldest. Theoretically, I wasn't the oldest, but being the oldest, I did a lot of the support and care of the younger ones.
That's right.
So, I would take time off school and just come home and just help out and take kids to kindy and pick kids up and take kids to school and that kind of thing.
Where were you? Were you in Auckland or?
No, that was in Hawke's Bay.
Hawke's Bay. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where I come from and that's where I've gone back to.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So, and our upbringing was very hard to describe. It was there was very little sustenance, so very little food, very little space, not enough warmth and not enough oversight of what was happening. So, and very little contact with the outside world. So we kind of existed in isolation as a family because there was so much happening and kind of our behavior was very much controlled, not by violence or anything like that, but just by expectations. And so we knew how to behave and we didn't deviate from that, because we were worried because sometimes we would go without if we did anything wrong.
So was it at an age you were expected to look after the youngest? It
wasn't expressly required, but it was what happened because I'm the kind of person that wants to make sure people are okay.
Sure.
And that was the case for my younger brothers and sisters. And so that's just how it happened. And I learnt lots and I am really grateful for all those brothers and sisters coming into my life. However, we lost my brother to suicide about 36 years ago. So he was one of the people who passed on. And he was Owen, and that was a terrible, terrible, terrible shock. But it was kind of understandable if you look at our family and how we resolved things or didn't resolve things, and how things weren't really talked about. You know, my parents were very English, and they weren't used to the culture in New Zealand, and they weren't used to the culture of the children they adopted as well. So,
can I ask you, is there any reason why they decide to have such a big family?
I think they grew up in the war in England, and my mother in particular was very lonely as a child. She was an only child, and she was evacuated out into the country at the age of 3, I think, and just was very, very lonely. And I think she would have really wanted more brothers and sisters. And I think that they really didn't know what was needed to bring up 10 children. And Dad was the same. You know, he grew up in the war as well. And so I think that's where it came from, where we didn't have much to eat. So we were constantly very hungry. And so I think that came from the time when my mum had very little to eat, and she was very religious as well.
Yes.
So, you know, at the dinner table, we had the picture of Mother Teresa watching over us, you know, and so we kind of felt grateful for every single morsel that came our way. But yeah, so my brother passed away. He took his life. And then 4 years ago, my sister took her life as well. So we had 2 people pass away now out of my brothers and sisters. So very, very sad. Very, very sad. Yeah, she wasn't happy. She really wasn't happy.
I mean, that must have a huge impact on your family.
Yeah.
The first one is hard. The second one must be even harder.
Yeah, and she left 3 children as well, which is very hard on them, you know.
Are you all still, as a family and siblings, still keeping in touch?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, because we have a messenger group, and we haven't been communicating. But just at Easter time, just a few days ago, I live in a vicarage in Puketapu. So the church is like 10 seconds walk away, and I love it. It's out in the country and it's just beautiful. And I went to church to the Easter Sunday service, and I sent a photo of one of the stained glass windows and just said, oh, you know, I hope everyone's having a good day. And I was thinking of Mum and Dad today when I was at church, and I think 5 of us responded in some way. And that's the first time we've ever actually started to communicate with, you know, hearts or comments, and that's pretty exciting. Yes. I'm quite excited about that. Yeah, I was really pleased to see that. So I'm hoping that will continue, because we only have each other, you know. That's what you realize as you get older and your parents pass. You just have your brothers and sisters left, and we don't have any aunties or uncles or cousins around. You know, we've got 3 cousins in England, but that's all. Yeah.
And can I say, you know, looking back, having that responsibility as a older sister, how long that responsibility kind of not necessarily stop? I mean, like the physicality of doing all the work.
Yeah. So that went on until I left home at 18 and went to be a student nurse down in Palmerston North. So, I mean, when I was living at home before I left, I was actually living, you know, there was a shortage of space. Every time we had another baby arrive, they'd cut one of the bedrooms in half and put a wall there to make, you know, just big enough for a bed, or they would move house. We moved house all the time to bigger houses, and Dad would do it up, and he was very clever at that. He was a very clever man. He would do it all up, renovate and everything, and then we'd sell that and go to another house. So at that particular time, I was actually sleeping in it was a wood shed with carpet and wallpaper, but it was still a wood shed, and the windows didn't shut and that kind of thing. And There were lots of cockroaches, lots of them. Not the little ones that you get in Auckland, but the Gisborne ones, that like the wood and like to be warm. And that was actually, I felt at the time couldn't communicate how difficult that was for me. I did mention it, but nobody heard it. Yeah. So I was trying to manage sleeping in an environment like that.
Not to mention during winter.
In the winter, yeah. So it was really, really cold, and I couldn't lie down because they would, they were there. They would crawl on me. So at one stage, I was standing up all night for quite a few nights, going into weeks, just trying to avoid the experience. And so that caused such a level of stress for me that I suddenly started hearing voices, and I heard all kinds of different things. It was almost like a movie, it just suddenly happened, and since then I've always been able to hear voices.
So when it first happened, there's two things I want to say. First is you sounds like someone who always thinking about others before yourself.
That's what I was taught.
That's why even in that most uncomfortable environment, you still think about your sisters, your brothers, their needs before your needs. Because I want to clarify, people is like, why is she didn't? It's not. You're being taught, and also the nature of who you are. That's why you keep giving. And there's no space for you to even truly voice about how uncomfortable that environment was.
Yeah, I didn't know how to talk about what I was feeling. We weren't taught that. So that kind of didn't set us up to be very resilient. That voice hearing experience that I started hearing at that age, I was about 16, 17 at the time. And, my father had taken the key away to the room. So I wasn't even able to lock the room at night time. So I didn't feel safe and that kind of thing. So, it was...
Were you scared when you first?
I was terrified.
Yeah.
Terrified.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But, it's made me... These days, I've been able to put everything together, and I can use what I have learned from those times. I can relate to people when they say that, I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I see how many gaps there were for me and my brothers and sisters, especially in the bottom one. And then there's safety, and that wasn't being, I had trauma as well. And so the fundamental things weren't available to us. So that kind of, it's really understandable when you start to unpick someone's story and you start to understand where everything started to go wrong and what happened and what is your interpretation of that. And how did that happen? And how does that make you feel? And that kind of thing, it's really important to understand where people have come from. So it's not about what is wrong with you. It's about what has happened to you. Yeah. Because if you understand and you listen to what's happened to someone, it starts to make sense.
Absolutely. That's why it's so important to having people to share their story.
Yes.
Because none of them happen in a vacuum.
No, that's right.
And I am curious though, when that happened to you at the age of 16, do you have any help and support?
No.
And how then you carry on? And
well, it was kind of, when it first happened, it was kind of I didn't totally freak out. It was kind of, this is interesting, this is something I haven't experienced before.
Yeah.
And I kind of, because I was all by myself, and so I kind of knew that I had to deal with it by myself. Yeah. And so, I basically, it came down to two particular voices that have been with me ever since, two male voices, and they kind of do rhymes. They say rhyming things and they comment on different things. And I haven't because of that, I'm good in an emergency because nothing phases me, anything can happen. I'm good with it, because I don't know what's going to happen next in my world. So I'm very good in an emergency, and B, I am able to live my life with this experience and I'm still doing what I need to do in life. I finally found my way over all these years. I'm 61 this year. So I finally feel like I've got a handle on life. And if that means, that's me and the voices and even the connection to the spirit of the wind, which is really important to me as well. So I have a rich internal life going on, but I'm still able to work. I work full time. I have a son, Matthew, and a granddaughter, Nico.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
What a joy.
Yeah. So I love going to see them in Adelaide, and I do that as often as I can. So, yeah.
Just thank you so much for sharing it. I'm a crying baby, so if I cry, please don't. Sharing what you said, that's why you're here in Auckland, providing training for people who experience hearing voices.
Yes. So what's happened is I'm the chairperson of the Hearing Voices Network at the moment. And what happened was the network was existing, but COVID hit and a few other things happened and it almost collapsed. It almost collapsed.
I'm so glad it didn't.
Yeah. So I said to the chairperson at the time, do you want me to give it a go? Because I'd been chairpersons before, I'd done that kind of thing before. So she said yes. She's still involved, and she said yes. And so I did facilitated a training down in Hawke's Bay to train people to be able to run Hearing Voices support groups. So it's not a Hearing Voices workshop. It's a training session so that they can run Hearing Voices support groups.
So it's like a peer.
Yes.
Yeah, peer support.
It is peer, but what we do say is that if you're running a support group, at least one of the facilitators needs to have lived experience of hearing voices.
Amazing.
So I've been facilitating groups for quite a long time now. Yeah.
I want to say I couldn't speak highly value of lived experience because you can have all the clinicians who might have all the qualifications, but unless someone who have that experience, they will never understand what someone had to deal with.
Yes.
It's not easy just to pull out the textbook and say all the right things.
Yes.
Unless you have someone who can role model and share that experience.
Yes.
People would never truly resonate like, oh my God, someone really understood me. So that's the power of lived experience.
It's powerful. Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that's why I say, that's why I tears up, because I want to give this to share it with other people. And because I know when people cannot see others who equally experience it, they feel so alone.
Yeah.
But when they're in a setting, feel safe and know that they are not the only one, it bring out so much joy in them because they know, wow, these people just like me. And there's nothing wrong with us. Yeah, exactly. It's magic. It really is magic, peer support. And people come to the Hearing Voices group that I run and they just, they fill out evaluation forms. And the main thing is that I know I'm not alone now and that I met people like me and they say that. And it's just very powerful. And, when they first come along, the first thing I say to them is, don't panic, it's okay. It's okay to hear voices. You're all right. And you're actually, it sounds like you're quite gifted actually, because not everyone can hear voices. So, just giving them the messages that they're special and they're important and their experience is unique. So hard as well, because I know many of them have to hide that side of them.
Well, I did.
Yeah, because you're afraid of saying wrong thing and then immediately people is going to put under mental health act.
Yes.
You're saying the wrong thing, people is going to panic like, oh my God, what are we dealing with now?
Yeah.
And so everything came from such a deficit model.
Yes.
Instead of empowering someone and say, let's talk about what you hear. Absolutely,
you're quite right. Yeah. So I went through, I was admitted to hospital at 19 And then I went from Manawara Hospital in Palmerston North to the Hastings Psychiatric Unit. And then I was transferred to a Kingshead Hospital in South Auckland. And I spent a total of nearly 2 years in hospital. You know what? I don't think it was because I was unwell for 2 years. I think it was more in those days because I had nowhere else to go. So in those days, the system was quite different.
Yeah.
And I had the freedom to wander around the grounds, which were immaculately, there was a swimming pool and there was a library, and if you wanted to, you could get the bus on Friday into Papakura, and there was some good times. Obviously there was forced treatment, which wasn't good, and I experienced some things that weren't good at all. But at the same time, it was a time where I could just reflect, and so I came out when I was about 21, and I had my 21st birthday in hospital. Then I went to what in those days was called Richmond Fellowship. So now,
It wasn't very big.
Yeah, so I had residential care, and then I moved from there into kind of sheltered accommodation flat, and then from there I went. From there, I went to supported employment. In those days, it was called the Rehabilitation League. So it was really set up for people coming back from the war and rehabilitating them vocationally, and then they would get jobs. So I went there, and they didn't really know what to do with us because we had mental health issues. They were more geared up for people in wheelchairs and, people who were physically somehow changed after the war. So we kind of just did bone carving and that kind of thing. And yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I met lots of interesting people, but so I went through that. Over the years, I've been through the mental health system quite a lot. I've had forced treatment. I've been under the indefinite treatment order and managed to get myself off that, which was quite a feat. And
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And to be honest, hearing what you share about your childhood, I felt like you taking on a lot of adult burden from very young age. And usually that's what causes stresses, isn't it? Because it's not supposed to be. And by doing so throughout your childhood, even adolescent to, teenager and all that, you haven't even have a space to rest.
No.
Yeah. And what you truly needed is actually a safe space to rest because you're physically and mentally so exhausted.
Yeah, I was.
It's and that's what I feel frustrated is using the word mental health sometimes it simplify people's life and challenges. It kind of just put a label without.
I don't like labels.
I hate that. The older I get, the more I dislike about the word mental health, resilience, and all that label because it doesn't speak the volumes of human journey.
No, it doesn't. You're right.
Yeah.
It's very compartmentalized.
Yeah.
It is.
But share about how you then get involved in this.
Sure. So what happened was when my son was a preschooler, there was a public meeting in Napier, and I think it was the HFA or the chair at the time, the funders at the time came to town. It was actually Mike Sotolsky who came to town, who's a well-known activist. And he came to town and he sort of said to a public meeting where we all got together, we want to fund a drop-in kind of place in the region. And those who are interested, please put your name down. So there were a handful of us, about 6 of us. We were told that we needed an umbrella organisation to help us to set everything up for this service. And so with having had all the lived experience I'd had, and I was under the service at the time, I put my hand up, and we had to end up going under the hospital, the DHB, if you like, at the time, the hospital umbrella. because we didn't know anyone else who could help us in that situation. So it wasn't the best idea. They would literally, none of us had transport or anything. And so they would they would come around with the van and pick us all up and take us to a meeting place. And we would meet and discuss the policies and procedures we were going to need, how we wanted the service to run, and all that. And it took us nearly 2 years of meeting before we were actually ready to open the doors. Wow. So we called it the Lighthouse. It was just shut down last year. We had funding for it at that time, but at some stage after I left, quite a few years later, for some reason, the funding was stopped. So WIT, who now were then running it, they're a peer organisation, but they kept it going through the other funding from other contracts. Kept it going. Really, it was right in the middle of Napier. Such a perfect place to reach out to people who were coming in. And it was our place, we felt safe there. Yeah. And it was really cool. It was a really awesome place. And I'm really proud of the fact that I was heavily involved in setting that up. Yeah. Then
and sorry, so that is also a very first kind of consumer run organization being set up in New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken.
There was Psych Survivors.
Oh, that's
was
right.
going.
Yeah.
And Auckland. So, and I think they had some contracts across the country as well. I'm not sure about that, but I think they did. So there was Psych Survivors. That was basically the one. So the funding that we received for the Lighthouse, the Nelson received the same funding, and they called theirs the White House. And then I think there was another one which didn't really get off the ground. I'm not sure about that one, but I was aware of the Nelson one. So Pauline Hines, who was like the mother of the lived experience movement in New Zealand, was her and Maria Hagen. Yeah. And Pauline just talked me through everything. Wow. We spent hours on the phone because she was down south. We spent hours and hours on the phone where she was coaching me through, all education around the consumer movement rights, human rights, everything I needed to know. Yeah. She was amazing. She's not with us any longer, but she really was a very clever person and very, very supportive. And it was amazing. So I learned some very valuable information at the beginning of my experience of setting something up.
And then how do you get involved with the setup of Auckland DHB at the time?
Well, what happened was I was doing a contract for the Mental Health Foundation. Was me, Iwa Natana, and Sarah Mokokwe. Yeah. So we did the short-term contract for the Mental Health Foundation, and we consulted we had meetings with anyone with lived experience in the region. That was including Northland.
Can I just check what year was it at the time?
My son was about 9 years old and he's now 36 this year. So it was quite a long time ago.
Because I want people to know what we experience now, like lived experience is not new.
It's not new, no. It's been around for a
long time. Yes. I just want to acknowledge that, like a lot of people started, like Mariel Hagen and Pauline. They are kind of the first wave. Can you say that? And then you kind of came along, kept on that legacy. But a lot of people think lived experience new is like, no, happened way back.
Yeah. So we did that contract. We consulted with people about what they wanted from a consumer network within Auckland and Northland. And so we submitted the report to the Mental Health Foundation and to the funders at the time. And then nothing happened. And I was like, the end of the financial year was coming up, and I knew I had nothing else to know that if it hadn't been arranged for the next financial year, we would miss out.
Yes, right.
So I rang them and I said, what's happening with the fund, with the Auckland Regional Consumer Network. The person at the time, I can't remember quite who that was, but she said, wow, she said, we've got the funding here, but we don't know of any consumer groups that are set up at the moment. And do you know of any groups? And I said, actually, because there was a group of us who had set ourselves up because at Te Whetū Tawara, there was an overbridge over the motorway and people were literally jumping off the overbridge. So we were writing letters to say, fix this situation. This is not okay. So we wrote a few letters and that was kind of what we had, the sum total of what we had done. We hadn't met for very long. And I said to them, hey guys, there's this contract and, do you want to do it? Because they're willing to let us have a go. And we had a special meeting and a lot of them were kind of ambivalent and not sure. And I was saying, guys, this is really good. We really need to do this. And they said, yes. So we had to fill out RFP. Yes. And we spent hours and hours over a weekend. We were told we had to do it by Monday at 5 p.m. and this was Friday. So we had to go through the whole contract process.
And there's no computer at the time?
There were computers, yeah, but it was all very new. And with the Lighthouse, we were barely on computers, barely. But with the Regional Consumer Network, we were using at the time, Crossways Clubhouse computer to do that in the weekend.
Wow.
And so we managed it. We did a really good RFP. We submitted it literally by 5 p.m. on Monday. And then they said, okay, well, who's going to umbrella you?
Yeah.
You have until tomorrow, 5 p.m. to decide who's going to umbrella you. And we were like,
oh my God.
Okay, so, and the only people that I knew who could do that kind of umbrella-ship was Richmond Fellowship.
Yes.
So I rang up the head of the Richmond Fellowship in Auckland at the time, who knew me from when I was in residential service and can't remember the suburb at the time. And he was Peter Farley. And I said to him, Peter, can you please umbrella us? He had a special meeting with the board within a few hours and they came back with, yes, we will umbrella you. Every time the funders obviously thought we couldn't make the deadline. So we made the deadline and we said, yes, we've got an umbrella organisation. So we gave them no excuse not to fund us and not to go ahead with it. So we ended up with the funding. And so we started meeting at Crossroads Clubhouse to start to do all the policies and procedures and service development and service design and everything. And that took us, I think it was close to another 2 years, like the Lighthouse. And then we managed to get, like the Lighthouse, we managed to get a Housing New Zealand community house in Mount Eden Road.
And people don't know now it's called Changing Minds.
It's now called Changing Minds. So that's the beginning of the Regional Consumer Network. And we covered Northland as well. Yeah. So I would drive up to Northland and have a meeting with them and see what their needs were and let them know about any service developments that were happening and feedback.
Can I just say something? It's like your journey, even from the beginning, has kind of like set you out for all these purposes and connection without, even with the Richmond Fellowship that you had that connection with them.
I did, yeah.
It wouldn't even allow you to make that phone call.
No.
It's almost like everything like a building block.
Yeah. It's amazing how it happened.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
Even just hearing it, I was sitting here like, even from young age, you were taught to give. And then when you step into this consumer environment, you still give, but in a very different way, which is a lot more systemic and bigger sense of making things happen. Without a phone call to ADHP,
they were going to just let it roll. They were just going to let it go away. Yeah. Wow. So we managed to secure it. and now we have changing minds today, which I'm really proud of. And
you're so humble. I didn't know you involved so heavily. I knew people were talking about it. I hear some story, but this is the first time I truly knew, because I was a board member of Regional Consumer Network at some point as well, but I didn't know the history.
Yeah, yeah. So there were many people involved in setting it up.
Yeah.
You know, there was Alison Marshall, Dean Manley,
Yes.
and quite a few other key people. Alison was the chairperson of the kind of group for quite some time. And you know, it was hard work. It was really hard work.
Yes.
There were so many scenarios that came up that and pressures that came up that you wouldn't even imagine would be things that we'd have to deal with. But I loved every minute of it. You know, I loved it. So
I know eventually you're stepping down as well.
yes,
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I went to, I think I got the job at Ime Aotearoa, so I did that service lead something with Ime Aotearoa for quite some time. And I used to travel around the country to train staff or kaimahi up in chime and hearing voices. So, and I still do those two things today. I use chime in my work, and I support people with their hearing voices experience. So I've not really strayed very far from that time. I at one stage I was asked after Ime Aotearoa, I was asked to go into the Auckland City Mission to set up peer support there. So I did that, and that was fascinating because it wasn't a mental health peer support. It was that people who experience homelessness.
That's right.
So that was quite unique. So I kind of at the time looked around the country and thought, who could train these people? Who understands the story and the journey of these people and could deliver peer support training? There wasn't anyone at the time.
No.
There really wasn't. So I thought, okay, I'll do it myself. So I, you know, based on intentional peer support, I built this training package for peer support workers who experience homelessness and delivered that alongside Fire Rose at the Auckland City Mission. And we trained up 12, 13 people and then the mission employed 3 of them part-time. So 2 of them came to fruition, and I believe now they've got quite a few peer support workers.
That's amazing.
It was really interesting. I learned so much from those people.
Yeah.
Just so much. And they, you know, they knew very little about mental health and knew nothing about the system. All they knew really was about survival on the streets. And it was just fascinating.
Wow.
Fascinating. And I'm still in contact with one of those people.
That's amazing.
I'm going to be seeing her tomorrow. So.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
So where are you at now?
Well, I had quite a few jobs in Auckland. The last one I had in Auckland was at Kahoot, where I was team lead for the consumer advisors for Auckland.
That's right.
And so I was
They got
there.
the contract from Mind and Body.
Yes,
that's right.
So I was doing that, and my dad was not well in Hastings. In Napier, he had dementia, and I kind of had a calling to go back, to go home. And it was taking me so long to get to work, you know, and work was only a couple of suburbs away, but it just took like an hour and a half sometimes to get home. And I just thought, why am I doing this? Why? And so I thought, no, I want to do something different. I want some quality back in my life. And so I moved back down home just after Cyclone Gabrielle. And I kind of thought, I'll just see what I can do.
Mm.
You know, I didn't, at the time I decided to move, I didn't have a job down there. So just like a day before I moved, I got rid of everything and just had a carload of my possessions. And the day before I moved down there, I had an interview to be a team leader of transitional and emergency housing at WIT. And so it was kind of full circle. So I kind of came back to it. They were really keen. So on the day that I moved, I got the phone call to say I got the position. So that was really interesting, working in housing. And, you know, I had responsibility for something like 34 houses with all the families and the whaiora, the tangata whaiora that were in those houses. And it was a lot of responsibility.
I was going to say, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some fascinating things that happened, honestly, things you wouldn't read about. So, yeah.
But again, you're ready for it because you have experience.
Yeah.
It's probably just not in that kind of intensity where you suddenly put everything together in a place that you have to, but there's nothing new to you, I would assume.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I saw this job at House New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I thought, actually, I'd quite like to try that. You know, I think I could make a difference. I think. And so I went for the job and I got it very easily. And I've been working there ever since. And I do the time work. So working with people on their recovery, with connections, figuring out their connections, how much hope they have for the future, their identity, you know, who are they, and what are their values and beliefs, meaning and purpose. What gets them out of bed in the morning, or what doesn't get them out of bed in the morning, you know, and then empowerment, you know, taking on the responsibility of your own health and well-being. And it's a completely non-clinical approach, and it's completely, I'm able to bring my lived experience into it. So it's a very powerful thing to be involved with. Deliver the Hearing Voices support group as well. I also work with families, with people who have that experience and their families and their friends and that kind of thing as well. So I love it.
Wow.
I really love it.
That's amazing. You have done so many things. I didn't know the full extent of the word because you, like what I say, you're very humble and quiet. You don't go and blow your own trumpet.
No,
You're not that
not
kind of
really
person
my
at all.
style, no.
You always stay behind the scenes and just, yeah.
I think one of the things that I was most proud of was working at Counties Manukau DHB, and I led a team of evaluators there. We all had lived experience.
Wow.
And we evaluated all the clinical mental health services on a and one after the other after the other. We used a kind of a qualitative narrative approach.
Wow.
And we were really effective at doing that.
Yeah.
So we would write reports. I've actually still got a couple of those reports. I'm not supposed to have them. But at one stage we evaluated the Waitemata peer support services as well. So that was fascinating.
So that was the contract with White and Body or someone?
Yeah, one of them. It was one of the ones we evaluated. And so I did that, and I actually went to Ireland to present on the PER team, the evaluation team that we were doing at counties. And I think that was a really cool experience.
Yes, and it also sounds like first of its kind because none of the clinical team have ever been evaluated from a lived experience perspective. That's amazing. I didn't even know that. Yeah, so
yeah, we did a really good job of that.
yeah.
And it was really cool. And then, I did that for I think it was nearly 5 years.
Wow.
I think. I'm not quite sure about that.
Wow.
But it was stressful.
I was
really
going
cool.
to say because you guys would have faced a lot of challenges.
Yeah, so it was multi-stakeholder.
Yeah.
So we interviewed psychiatrists, we
That's what I
interviewed the
mean.
psychologists, the managers, the staff, the families, the tangata whaiora themselves and NGOs that were working with the service. So we interviewed a lot of people for every evaluation.
Because there's a thing that shifts the whole power dynamic, isn't it? Yeah.
So I believe the per team isn't existing anymore. Yeah, it's a real shame. I would love to do that again.
I think it's amazing. That's very meaningful, and that gives you a true insight into the whole picture, isn't it?
Yeah.
And truly understand where the system fell.
And what they're doing well. That's just as important to identify what skills they've got, what they're doing that's really working for people, and don't change that because that's what's working, and what, if any, improvements could be made, just as important.
So were they able to take the learning and the evaluations and do some, because I know such a challenge process, isn't it? Even you might have things that really spelling out what need to change and all that, but sometimes making those changes is hard because of the resistance from the sector and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And we would provide them with a report and recommendations for improvements. And then every 3 months we would go back to them and say, how are you doing with making those improvements? So there really were some changes implemented as a result of our work.
That's amazing.
And then the attitude at the time was very good. Sometimes I would get phone calls from services to say, when are you coming to evaluate us? And so it was very interesting.
What a shame. So it didn't.
After I left, I don't think they replaced me, or they restructured or something. And now there's no per team.
Thank you for sharing that. I learned so much from you, even from this short period of time. There are so many good historical facts that people don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And there's such an archive, to be honest. Because I truly believe New Zealand has one of the unique consumer movement, but yet those stories have never been captured.
Yes, I know.
Even how regional consumer network was set up originally, no one knew.
No.
They just know it's a
People
consumer.
move on. People move on, and if there isn't anyone around to remember and to put all the pieces together, then it can get lost. And, there's some really important, pivotal people that I know at the moment, and some of them not well, physically not well. And it's like, please just talk into a microphone, just get your story down so that we've got some history of what's happened.
Let me know if you think of anyone.
Oh, I will.
Please, I can do it online. I want to honor.
Yeah.
I really want to honor them.
Yeah, there's one person in particular that I'll let you know.
Please. Yeah. Because for someone who has lived experience, without anyone who walked before me, I wouldn't be able to be where I am. And so it's very important that I can keep honoring individuals who have done such an amazing work.
You're doing an incredible job of what you're doing, Ivan, and you always have done very good work. I remember when back in the days of the Regional Consumer Network, and you were just doing such pivotal work.
I was still learning, my God.
We were all just learning, You just did an amazing job. And you knew your staff, and you worked with Dean, and he always spoke very highly of you.
It's sad about his sudden departure as well, and so unexpected.
Yes, it was.
Can I go back to hearing voices, your experience you have? Because what I really want to emphasize is, because every time when people think about hearing voices, they all thinking about negative.
I know.
Would you like to share a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So what people experience is often quite frightening at times. Sometimes it's enlightening. Sometimes voices can be protective. Sometimes voices can be supportive. And sometimes they can be right pain in the ass. And that's okay. You take the good with the bad. It's like any relationship. You take the good with the bad with people. It's the same with voices. So what people come to understand is, when they've been to a Hearing Voices group for a few times, what they come to understand is that actually, if you reach out to those experiences or reach out to those voices and start some kind of communication with them, you can actually end up with an understanding of what the voice is there for. Because everything has a reason, surely, So let's unpack what that voice is doing for you. What are the positives about it? What are the negatives about it? When is it the worst? When is it best? What are you doing at the time? There's all kinds of different variables that you need to think about. And when you've realized that actually when I'm doing this, they're really bad. And when I'm doing this, often gaming or something like that, that takes all your full attention, you're left alone. So it's really worth the Hearing Voices groups, gives you an opportunity to unpack your experience. And we even have people who say, I have some good voices, and they tell the bad voices off. And for me, I've got to a stage where I can say to my voices, hey, I'm working today. So if you have any issues, come back to me. It's at 5:30 because, I'll be off work then. And we have a conversation and they air their concerns quite often. And I'm like, don't think that's a concern. I've got it all under control. No need to worry. And it's like when people first come to the Hearing Voices group, they often feel controlled. They feel like they're a victim of their experience and they don't have any control or power over their experience. So what we need to do is to show them the way to start to take control of their recovery journey and start to take control of their experience. And once they have done some of the readings that we provide and have had the opportunity to talk about their experience, suddenly they're not so much a victim anymore and they start to take some control. Because some of them, they come along and they say, I can't work. I'm too overwhelmed with my experience and I can't work. I can't go to the gym. I can't do anything. And, I've got it 24/7. And over the weeks of them coming, they'll start to say, actually, I had a bit of a break the other day and I was doing this activity and I noticed I had a break. So it's about noticing these things. And we've had people come out the other side of going to a Hearing Voices group for some time and then saying, actually, I'm going to work. I'm ready. And, my voices I run my life now and my voices don't run my life now.
I can relate to it from my own anxiety perspective because for years I'm so afraid of it.
Yes.
I just keep running away because I felt like it have a control over me, and until I finally willing to step into it,
Yes.
I was able to dance with the energy.
Yes.
So I can relate from that perspective. But I also can relate to it because I do have a brief experience of hearing voices back home when I was about 26 or 27, when I was really extremely distressed as well.
Yes.
It was really brief, but then now and then I also, it's not auditory, it's like an inner knowing.
Okay.
Telling me something is often most unexpected, but it was accurate to a T that I still don't know how to explain to people. So I can kind of relate to it in a very small doses because it's never kind of like had that ongoing. But then when it appeared, it kind of just, yeah, but it wasn't scary. It was just confirming things that I need to pay attention or need to know. Yeah.
When we talk about hearing voices, we include people's visions, and because culturally, people have different experiences. So sometimes it's about ideas that other people don't have and, believing, or concepts that other people don't believe in, and touch and smell and taste and all of those kinds of experience. So we include anyone who's just having an alternative kind of experience.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool. 1 in 10 people will have voice hearing or some kind of experience in their lives at some stage, often after grief, often that's the case, but many reasons, and only a third of those people actually come to the attention of mental health services. So only a third actually need some help with it. And so I'm a firm believer in not labeling people. I don't think labels help.
I agree.
They don't help with me.
No.
They put you in a box.
That's true.
And everyone is so different. Yes, we come together with a shared experience, but all our experiences are different. And I don't believe you can put people in boxes. And we don't discuss diagnosis. We don't discuss medication, really. We don't discuss symptoms or anything. You know, we don't use that language at all. We just discuss people and their experiences. So
that's why it's so useful.
Yeah. And every now and then someone says, but I've got schizophrenia. And I'm like, we all have those, we all have those labels, but we don't talk about that here.
I hated that.
It's not important. It doesn't describe you as a person. It really doesn't. So we kind of park that quite quickly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Yeah.
So,
the longer I with mental health, like work and system and all that, the less I'm able to buy into all this clinical model. I disagree. So I know there's a value of it. Don't get me wrong, like they're helping people for sure. But just look at the result. The more money they pump in, it doesn't produce the outcomes that we hope to see. So that's just my own personal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, sometimes I see people being put on multiple medications and then wondering why they're not functioning very well when they've gone 5 or 6 different combinations of medications, and who knows what that does to a person. I still take medication, but just enough to function and do what I need to do in life, and that works for me.
Exactly, because that's what I want to emphasize as well, is like a person taking control of what actually useful for them, not being forced upon into what treatment they should receive.
Yes.
And that's a huge difference, isn't it? It's like these resources are out there for you to decide what works for you, instead of saying, now we decide what is best for you. Such a different approach.
It is. It really is. I enjoy life so much. I really enjoy life. I enjoy every day. I've enjoyed this. I enjoy every minute. And I'm very, very lucky with what I've been through. And tomorrow I'm doing an Auckland training on hearing voices group facilitated training. Adrian Gacon's going to support me with that, and I'm really looking forward to that. And who knows where that'll lead.
So people can find the support groups. I'll put the link if they're looking for
So they need to join the Hearing Voices Facebook page, and on the Facebook page, that's where we advertise anything that's happening or coming up. And as a result of the training tomorrow, we're hoping that we'll get a group in Whangarei. We're hoping to get some more groups in Auckland. At the moment, Deborah Lampshire is doing a few groups, 1 or 2 groups, I think.
I was hoping to interview her as well.
Yes, she will. I'm sure she will, when she's got time. So she's obviously the mother of the Hearing Voices movement in New Zealand, and she's pretty amazing. She really is.
I think you're amazing. I truly think you're such a gift to the society. What you have done is just amazing. Look at where changing mind now is.
It's really surprising.
Without you making that phone call, keep chipping away and challenge the system, the organization wouldn't have existed.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe it would have happened in another way. Maybe. We don't know.
I truly believe there is a reason for everything happening.
Same.
Yeah, without your experience, even with the lighthouse, probably wouldn't put you in the place where you can really work and make it happen. And without the experience with Richmond Fellowship, we wouldn't have someone to call and say, was you willing to consider that?
Yeah.
And because of who you are, people trusted you. That's why all this thing happened. So when you make a request, it's like, yeah, I'm going to talk to the board member and see what's going on.
Yeah.
That's a show.
I really believe, Ivan, that everyone has a place in the world. Everyone has something to do. And it's just a matter of identifying what your contribution is going to be to life. And sometimes it can wane and sometimes it can come back, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but you're always progressing forward with your life. I really, but everyone that I see, I'm like, what is your contribution? What can we identify? Why are you here?
That's what I believe too.
Why do you believe you're here? Because everyone is important.
Can I ask you one last question? Let's say if you can go back to your younger self and give advice to your younger self, the age that you identify, what would you say to her?
I would say to her that I love her and I would look after her.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.